Welcome everyone to the conversation on global innovations in schooling. My name is Moinak Roy. I am the CEO and co-founder of Simple Education Foundation. Simple Education Foundation is an education nonprofit based out of Delhi, and our mission is to transform teaching and learning and educational practices inside public schools or government schools in India. And it is great to have Leah and Alex with me on the call. Leah is the head of school improvement at Kizazi. And before this, she's worked with a lot of other organizations, and she started this journey of working with children at New Orleans with the Teach for America Fellowship. And I also have, and Leah currently is actually pursuing her master's in education from Harvard University. I also have with me Alex. Alex is the head of innovations at Rising Academies Network. And like Leah and me, she also started her career teaching children at Mozambique with the Peace Corps program. So it's great to have the two of you, and it's always great to start and have these conversations in education with individuals who've had experience teaching inside a classroom. So I think I'm really excited and looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Thank you, thank you. I will straight off jump into the conversation. The title of our talk or our chat today is Global Innovations in Schooling. I want to really unpack this word innovation. So my question to both of you, and feel free to sort of take this forward as a conversation and not really like me asking you questions. When as individuals who are focused on looking and identifying innovations, as individuals looking and identifying innovations, what really constitutes or defines innovation in education for the two of you?
Leah, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I think when I'm looking across different school models, and innovation is really for the people and by the people. I can't say that there is kind of one solution that will meet all of our unique needs, but I've seen a common through line in someone kind of just solving problems in a unique way that meets the needs of the people. I think that's the only commonality I can speak on.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what Leah just said. I think sometimes we can get caught up in this word innovation and expect that it means some magic thing that's come out from somewhere.
Exactly.
And that's not it at all. It is actually solving a problem. And I think most of the times innovation starts from how you think about the problem. Because if you see something and it's been bothering you and you're just not paying attention to it, you want to push it away, you're not giving the problem the attention it needs. But if you can actually go up close, look at it and figure out like, what is it about this problem that makes it so tricky? What if I looked at it from this angle? What if I looked at it from this angle? It's how you have the mindset and the belief in yourself and in the people around you that you can start to figure out how to untangle that knot that you're viewing. And I think if you bring that mindset and that problem solving attitude and you're willing to pull people around you and say, hey, could you come take a look at this with me? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? It's definitely a collaborative enterprise as well. So if you want to be an innovator, you're looking to start some innovation, I would start hunting for really tough problems and problems that people may be ignoring or haven't paid attention to before. You can find small problems in lots of places. And I really do think the small things can become the big things. If you solve one small thing really well, that will kickstart an effort to start searching for problems in other places and solving those.
Yeah, I love that part that you raised, Alex, about focusing on something small. I think we think innovation has to be sort of like a whole scale technology revolution, or we need to tear down the walls and rebuild everything because it's flawed, and it's not, right? I think innovation can exist in the classroom next door. It can be, what is this teacher doing that is so unique to get students to learn this language or this concept. It can be what was done in this community that we're seeing such different results that we want to try here. So I think it's really zeroing in on the small but mighty changes that we see around us.
Yes, small and mighty.
That's amazing. I think I really like that phrase, small and mighty. And I think also, like, it was just 5 minutes into the conversation, and I'm really glad that we've sort of de-stressed innovation. Sometimes innovation can be this mighty word, and like everyone sort of worried, are we really innovating? And I think the way you all explained it, I'm seeing a lot of context, I'm seeing a lot of usefulness, a lot of effectiveness are some of the key things that really define innovation from what I heard from the two of you. So as an innovator, what are some of the early markers that really define an innovation? Like, when do I really know that, I have actually, I'm probably close to hitting the nail on its head?
I would say you try something that you think is going to work and it doesn't work.
Okay.
And you go, why didn't that work? And then you're like, oh, it didn't work because of this thing. And you get an idea for how to do it differently the next time around. It's that insight, I think, that is sort of the spark to know that you're on the path to something. You haven't figured out yet, but you're starting to see a little bit of the journey that you need to take.
Yeah, and I think you can only understand if something is working or not if you have data. So there's kind of like, I'm sure many of us have seen this sort of like cyclical process of plan, act, gather feedback, and then refine. And I think where we can oftentimes spend too little time, or we think about feedback in a narrow way, is on that get feedback step. So that could look like interviews, that could look like just stepping back and observing. I think we like to focus on the quantitative, so test scores or satisfaction, but we really need to gather just many pieces of feedback and then sit down and say, okay, where are we making progress? Where should we step back and maybe refine this approach?
Okay. I think I would love to hear from both of you, like one of your personal journeys with innovation in education, and this can be inside the classrooms that you all taught or with the organizations that you've worked with. But if you can think of one of these journeys and just sort of take us through that a little bit.
I mean, I can start with a very recent example from COVID. I think COVID created a huge problem for all of us across the world. And so in creating that huge problem, it also becomes something that we need to try and figure out how to solve. So in the countries where Rising works, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Liberia, schools, like in many other places, shut down. Internet penetration is very low. And so we started talking to our government colleagues, and they said, we really want to try and promote some education content over the radio. And so we sat down with our team and said, what can we do to figure out how we can support the government in their initiatives to push education content out over radio. And we were able to take our existing lesson plans, adapt them so they can become radio scripts. And so we did an initial one. One of our teachers recorded it on her phone and then took it home to her kids and took a video of watching her kids listen to the radio. And then we all watched the video and we were able to see what parts of the lesson really worked, what parts of the lessons were too slow, what parts were confusing. And so based on our observations, watching children listening to these radio lessons, it helped us get much better at what the radio scripts would look like going forward. And so we were able, both in Liberia and Sierra Leone, to develop radio scripts that then became part of the COVID response in both of those countries. And we've posted all of the radio scripts that we developed on our website for free under a Creative Commons license. So we're hoping that it's not just a value for us, but it's a value for anybody who wants to go and take a look at them.
Yeah, and I think I have had the opportunity to go through some of those scripts Rising on Air, and I would strongly, I think, urge all of our listeners who've tuned in to this chat today to really go and look them up, because there's some fantastic and very simple material that you can do through any kind of audio means, actually. And thank you, Alex, for taking us through that journey, because it's often we just get to see the final product and
Sure.
we don't really get to see what is the journey. Leah, could you take us through one of your own examples as well?
Yeah, I'm tempted to speak about COVID because it's most recent,
Go
but
ahead.
I'm actually going to draw back. I'm going to draw back to the
Okay.
classroom, actually. So we were noticing that in our schools, students were reaching college or university, but they weren't completing. And so we realized that, okay, we're not actually doing something right. It's not that they don't have the content knowledge. There's something else there that we're missing. So after several rounds of like looking at data, conducting focus group discussions, we pinned down self-regulation and the fact that we were almost so narrowly focused on academics and testing and making all these benchmarks and doing well in a test score frame of mind. But what we wound up doing was then revamping our curriculum down to the timetable, how we teach lessons, what types of activities we're doing to intentionally cultivate self-regulation and broader life outcomes in our teachers. And so that for me is a really salient example of an intervention just in terms of restructuring your timetable, allowing time for students to explore, make their own choices, learn from their own mistakes. What does that look like? How do we rethink discipline? How do we rethink classroom structure, sitting? I mean, it really called on us to leverage our own creative license to restructure the classroom in a way that would allow our students to be more successful.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really tempted to also share something from our work, and this is primarily, obviously, the most recent during COVID, and taking off from some of the key markers that you all mentioned in the beginning. We started doing these learning packets through WhatsApp. And I think initially we were sending videos, we were sending images and a lot of different things. And then we slowly started seeing that, you know, our intake of voice messages, like voice notes that we would record on WhatsApp and send, was much higher than a YouTube video or image or a PDF that they had to download. And then I think the team sort of stepped back and really started redesigning most of the lessons with voice tags and with voice notes. And I think that for me was such a good example of learning from what we are sort of seeing on ground and really strengthening the innovation, which is part of the program. So just sort of shifting tracks a little bit, the two of you, I think in your own roles have the opportunity to really look at a lot of different organizations, a lot of different schools, and across different countries. When you look at these organizations and these schools or these classrooms or educators who are innovating on a regular basis, what are some of those human attitudes or values that you see sort of coming out in these individuals?
Yeah, I love that question. I think I see one, like people approaching this work with humility. I think if you want to innovate, you have to be willing to fail. It's almost inevitable, right? Like you fall 7 times, get up 8. So there's the approaching the work with humility and a willingness to learn. I think we also have to kind of tear down silos and collaborate. Some of the most transformational innovations I've seen have come through sharing a similar strategy that you applied maybe in a different context. I try it here. I say, oh, this didn't work, then I'm going to tweak this a bit. So that growth mindset, collaboration, and then also just understanding that it requires a lot of reflection. And so we oftentimes talk about learning, unlearning, relearning. Maybe you used to do something for 10 years, 20 years, and then you realize actually this is not the best approach, or this was really strong and maybe we just need to tweak these certain parts.
Yeah, I would only add one thing. I think Leah encapsulated it quite well. I think a lot of times having a very clear vision for what the end goal is can be really helpful, because there's so many decisions that you could take that will lead you in different directions. And especially as you're in a mode where you're like, we're ready to try all these different things, we want to get there. And you can sometimes get stuck in the what you're doing as opposed to really being focused on where you're getting to. So I think some of the organizations who are the most successful are ones who are very clear about the principles and the goals that they're trying to achieve. And then they're just working on figuring out the pathway to get there, and not letting, you know, the next shiny thing like VR headsets, woohoo, you know, not letting those
Or donors.
take donors. Yeah. Take
Yeah.
them off track. I think you have to be like very solid in what at the end of the day you are trying to achieve.
That's brilliant. And I think you all have said a couple of things which I see are not only individual attitudes, but also sometimes attitudes of the community where you are in, right? I have in my personal experience seen very innovative individuals get in places which do not sort of really nurture that innovation, and that sort of dies down. And the other way around, I would love to hear from you, probably in your experience as an organization or as a school leader or as an educator, what can someone do to nurture growth mindset, to nurture this whole push and this persistence or this grit to be mission focused, mission driven?
Mm-hmm.
I think one unique advantage we have at Kizazi is to pull together like-minded entrepreneurs. So I would definitely say leaning into community. I mean, Mainak, you've even spoken with some of our early stage entrepreneurs, and there's something so affirming about seeing someone who's a bit close to where you want to be, and understanding how they achieved that. What steps did you take? Oh, this was difficult for you as well. Oh, like this started just as an idea and you dared to act on it, right? And so I think creating that network, if not around you, then is it someone you know that's done something similar, that also was an entrepreneur, that can share their stories and kind of validate all of the natural challenges that come with being an entrepreneur.
And I'll speak a little bit to what it looks like internally within our organization. And I think a lot of times what I try and do is create space to bring people who wouldn't necessarily be having conversations in their normal day-to-day work, to bring those people together around a specific issue. And seeing if everybody is understanding the problems in the same way. Let's talk about what's really going on. Let's really define clearly what we want to tackle, build like a sense of team around this shared challenge, and give people permission to share ideas and ask questions. Because I think sometimes folks are like, oh, that's not my job. You're the head of it. That's your job. I'm like, no. It's all of our jobs. I'm just here to facilitate. Like, I'm not coming up with the ideas. I'm here to create space and encourage the conversation. And when I see people taking that risk that maybe wouldn't have taken a risk to say a new idea or come up with something, really supporting and encouraging them in that. And calling out, like, did you see what just happened there? Like, that's what we want. That is moving us further down the field. Because I think, you know, putting yourself, it can be scary, right? To put yourself out there and be like, hi, I think we should try something new. Because the most likely thing that will happen is everyone's like, that will never work. That will never work. So you have to create an environment where people are willing to put their ideas out there, and other people are willing to suspend judgment and sort of listen and let it sink in a little bit.
Thank you. Alex, if I had to ask you, what is your one favorite story of innovation from Rising? What would that story be?
So as I'm going to go to another COVID example because it's recent and it's one that I just love. So we, in addition to supporting radio lessons, we also set our teachers up to be doing individual tutorial phone calls with students. And I think the teachers were just so incredibly resourceful in managing this very difficult situation and figuring out how to connect with families and then how to work with individual students. And the feedback that we received from many of the teachers, like the experience for them doing these individual phone calls, also had a tremendous impact on their experience as teachers. So they were paired with a certain number of students who they were calling over about 12 to 16 week period once a week. So they were really able to follow the individual progress of students. And I think many of the teachers came out from that experience, one with impressed by what students are capable of when they were able to see that individual growth up close. And two, they also said, overwhelmingly, our teachers were like, I need to learn to be more patient. And so when I think about what are we learning through this crisis that can then help us as we figure out what going forward will look like, it just makes me so excited to think about hundreds of teachers that we had that had this amazing opportunity to work one-on-one with students in a way that they typically don't have the time to do, and how that will impact their thinking as they go back into the classroom as well.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing that. Leah, as a part of the Kizazi, as part of your work at Kizazi, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and school operators in Africa. If you could share with us I will not go ahead and say your favorite example or a favorite story, but any story that comes to your mind which really sort of stands out.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think there are so many. I think it can be easy to look through this kind of like deficit damage mindset. But even Alex, as you were speaking about Sierra Leone, the world could actually learn a lot from Sierra Leone, who's been forced to close schools due to previous emergencies. And so if I had to pick one example that really stands out, so through African Leadership Academy, we're working with a cohort of school leaders, and there's a network of micro schools in Egypt called ACT Micro Schools. And I think what really stands out about their approach is, one, it is all about relationships and intimacy. They're not looking to get like hundreds of students in the door. They would rather start a bunch of smaller schools. And I think their approach to teaching Pan-Africanism is fascinating. I think they really instill a lot of confidence in their students, and the school is also incredibly agile. So during COVID, they were ready to switch to technology, but then the government said, no, you're going to reopen after they had put everything on this online platform. They're like, okay, well, we have to switch now to preparing to maybe doing something in person or doing some sort of hybrid approach. And so I would just share that their agility, and back to Alex's earlier point, that mission alignment, they allow room for innovation as long as it's moving us towards this broader goal for our students and for the school.
Thank you. Thank you. I think what what I'm taking away from the conversation so far is this consistently, like we've been consistently debunking this myth that innovation has to be something crazy out of the world. And I think I feel like that is so empowering, because a lot of us often get stuck with this whole idea that we're not really innovating. But I think we lose out on those moments, like Alex, you mentioned, and like Leah, you mentioned, which can often get sort of overlooked in this current narrative of innovation that we have borrowed largely from Silicon Valley, if I can say so.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I want to sort of shift gears a little bit. One of the things that really prompted Inspire 2020 is India's new national education policy, and there are a couple of focus areas. I want to talk about three, and I want to really hear from you. What do you think of these priorities from the global lens? Are these also priorities that you see countries in probably other parts of, like probably in Africa or other other places sort of prioritizing, or are there other things that we need to sort of look at right now? So the three priorities, which I think I find really interesting, is this singular focus on foundational learning. So foundational literacy and numeracy, and how the government is aiming to really ensure that every child going to school will acquire the basic foundational literacy and numeracy skills by grade 3. The second thing that really I think I am very excited about, and I would love to see over the next few years how this pans out, is this strong focus on teacher professional development, and really sort of understanding that our teachers need to constantly sort of grow to be better teachers inside the classroom. And the third, which is a new aspect that has, I think, been added, although we've had a conversation around it for really long, but it has very recently been added, which is focus on early childhood care and education. So these are three things that I am really interested about, along with a lot of other things. But I want to ask the two of you, from a global lens, how do these three priorities really fit in?
So I would say the focus on foundational skills really resonates. I think globally you're seeing this emphasis. I mean, even the World Bank and the Sustainable Development Goals are being very clear about not just kids in school, but what are kids able to do as a result of being in school, and specifically focused around the early literacy and numeracy. So I think that's very in line with what you're starting to see. I think that also points to this idea of not just moving through a school year, but showing competence in something as a result of being in school. So it's not just about teachers covering every single piece of the curriculum, but teachers' roles are shifting so that they also have a clear idea of, I am teaching this so that my students will be able to do this. And now I am accountable and responsible to go back and see, I tried something, did it work? Let me do some formative assessments, see what children have learned, go back and try again. So instead of teachers just marching through a syllabus, they really are becoming, you know, and we've known this, I think we've known this for a long time. The biggest impact in a school on children's education is the quality of the teacher. And so I would say that focus on competence and teacher professional development has to go hand in hand, because it's a different view of what a teacher's role is, and it requires much more critical thinking and decision making on the teacher's side to be able to really assess, are my children making the progress they need to? And if not, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah, I'll pick up on the teacher professional development. And for all teachers listening, I want to say a happy belated World Teachers Day. I think we ask so much from our teachers. And if nothing else from the pandemic, parents have learned how difficult it is to teach. I mean, you're seeing like all these memes and posts about like I need them to go back to school. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to support them. And so my hope moving out of this is that, yes, continue to support teachers in service, pre-service support. And also, I think we need to integrate the community with the school. So I don't think the burden should fall on teachers. You know, we're hearing these conversations about, oh, well, your class performed this way, your class performed that way. And I'm wondering how we can work more as a committee, or like more collaboratively between the student, who also has had so much more agency this year than ever before, the community, and the teachers. So the onus is not on 100% on teachers to make sure that child achieves. There's so much more we could do to empower students to have more voice and choice in their learning. And that's where you really start to see them self-actualize, when they feel like, I'm learning this because I want to, or I'm learning this so that I can do this, and it connects to a broader goal. And also, what can the community and parents do to further support teachers? So I'm happy to hear that there is a focus on teacher professional development. I understand that the requirements are increasing. So you have to have, I think, a bachelor's to teach, which I support that. But I would love to see, moving out of this, that we don't lose the fact that it really does take a village to raise a child, and that teachers will do all that they can if they are met with the same amount of effort from the student and from the community.
Thank you. Thank you. I think just sticking to this line of thought, and also sort of going back to innovation. We have around 5 more minutes left. I want to again like go back to Leah and ask, in teacher professional development, what are some of the innovations that you are seeing happening across the world? And if you had to choose or talk about one or two, uh, could you like sort of share that with all of us?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that technology will never replace teachers, but it will make it a lot easier for them to collaborate, for them to get access to resources. And so I think where I've seen some real innovation is in that freely sharing of resources. And I know several networks, I mean, even like Rising, Alex, you were saying, you've uploaded all of these resources that teachers can use. So if there is that ability to collaborate and say like, hey, I want to teach this lesson, or I'm noticing this challenge, here's a resource you can go to. Another, and I don't know if it's an innovation, but I feel like we call everything innovations these days, but the fact of decentralizing coaching and feedback. I think it's something that we say the principal or the head teacher has to do. But where I've really seen a lot of growth in teachers is when it comes from peers. So I just, you know, if I'm friends with Alex, I pop into your classroom saying like, hey, I noticed you did this. Can you tell me how you did that? Or I'm facing this challenge. Can you help me brainstorm around that? So again, I don't know if these are real innovations, but I think that willingness to share and collaborate and leveraging tech to support, not to replace teaching, and then decentralizing a lot of that feedback and making sure that everyone feels responsible for personal growth, but then also for the growth of their colleagues.
Absolutely. And I think I resonate with both the points so much. And I feel like as a teacher, I grew a lot when my co-fellows or my co-teachers would pop in and give me feedback, because they were so deeply embedded in the context of my classroom or the community that I worked in. So definitely, I completely agree with what Leah, you've just pointed out. And I think definitely the pandemic has sort of moved us to collaborate a lot more than what we are otherwise used to. And I just hope that that continues. Alex, coming back to you, you spoke about the sort of global focus on ensuring foundational literacy and numeracy. If you could share like one example or one innovation that's happening right now, which you feel is a solid sort of move towards this outcome.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I keep being inspired and excited by, and also I think really pushing for, is this idea of open educational resources. If you think about children learning to read, they have to read something, and high quality texts many times are copyright and expensive. And so we have really benefited from sort of the movement around creating more open source stories for children to be reading in the early grades. And I think that has been tremendously impactful. You have the African Storybook Project, you have Literacy Cloud from Room to Read, you have Storyweaver coming out of Prothom, like just these amazing examples of where you can go to find open source stories that you can adapt, remix, use however you would like. We need to see that continuing up into the higher grades as well. At some point, those stories run out and students still need more complex text to be able to engage with. And it's very hard to find open source text that you can build curriculum and lesson plans around. And so I would just keep pushing sort of the global effort that we have to create more openly licensed content. I would like to see much more of that.
Yeah, and if I can add, I think more, definitely a lot of more openly licensed content, but also a lot of diverse content, content that really sort of talks about things that are more important to talk about today: gender inclusion, race, and everything else. So I definitely think that's going to be, that is so important. We are a minute away from closing. Any last thoughts, Alex and Leah?
I mean, I think to anybody who maybe came to this panel looking for answers, I would say you are the answer. Go out and do it.
Yeah, I think on a similar line, I'll just say like the future and whatever happens after here isn't something that just has to happen to us. I think we're largely in charge of that. And if we really want to invest in the future of society, we've got to continue investing in education. Those two are tethered together. We're preparing youth, not just for jobs, but for a society that we can't even envision yet. And so we are in control of our future, and we can make our best bet by investing in our students and our youth.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex and Leah, for joining this chat. And I think if there's something that I am taking away, that is that innovation is intentional. Innovation does not have to be massive. And the third thing, innovation needs to work for the people you are designing it for. Thank you so much. And I hope all of you go and check out all the different sort of examples that Alex and Leah shared with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.